Thank you, and thank you for having me back again. So, what a beautiful day we're having today. All this lovely weather finally. It's snowing in Alberta, so I saw pictures, it's not pretty. Okay, we're here to talk about Healthy Brain as a follow-up to our last presentation where we talked about what is dementia and about the diagnosis of dementia and whether or not we're normally aging or not. So we're going to focus today on all the Healthy Brain questions. We had a couple of those last time. I'm hoping I'm going to cover all that material today. So again, I'm just going to start. I'm from the Alzheimer Society of Niagara region. That's not really what we look like right now because we're under construction at the Alzheimer Society on Ontario Street, where you live on Lynn Haven's property, and is a giant size building that they're building next to us. We kind of look like a shed, but we are open and you're welcome to stop in and any time and see us. We have good coffee, so I can tell you that anyway. Our vision and mission, a community where individuals with dementia and their care partners are fully supported to maximize their quality of life and well-being, and our mission to advocate for and with people with dementia and their care partners and to provide a diverse range of appropriate resources and supports. All right, let's get to the fun stuff. So let's talk a little bit about our brain to give us a start out. So it's a really complex organ, our brain, and it does a lot of things. So for example, if you sit down in front of a table in front of a steaming bowl of hot chicken noodle soup, and you can smell the aroma of that, and you know exactly what that's going to taste like because you've all tried it at some point in your life. And you sit down at that table, your brain is going to do all sorts of things. So one, it's going to tell you, from your frontal lobes right here, that you are not going to just dive right in because it's hot, and that's going to burn your mouth. That's complex thinking. It comes from your frontal lobe through your executive functioning and your thinking and your planning. It's going to help you organize and problem solve the idea that you want to use a spoon and not a fork for this hot bowl of soup. That's a problem solving. It's going to regulate your manners, so you're not going to slurp that soup because your mother told you not to. That's also going to be part of your frontal lobe and some of that memory in your temporal lobe. Your memory is going to tell you whether you like chicken noodle soup or you're actually a minestrone kind of person. It's going to tell you how to move. The yellow section of your brain is going to tell you how to move your arm to pick up that spoon. Your sensory cortex is going to sense the smell, the sight, the heat coming off the bowl. And of course, your parietal lobe is going to tell you how far that bowl is away from you. It's going to tell you, sort of help you make sense of where you are in the context of the world. And then, of course, your occipital lobe is your visual center, so it helps you take in that information. So in a split second, your brain uses the entire thing to help you have a sip of this lovely bowl of soup. This happens for every single thing you do, right? Your brain is constantly working. It's never just one area of your brain, it's your whole brain. And it helps us to control every aspect of our life. So today, we're going to talk about keeping it healthy. What can we do to keep our brain healthy? So last time we talked about normal aging, and we continued into what is dementia. But today, we're going to focus on this fantastic organ and how we are going to take care of it. So, question of the day, can dementia be prevented? That is a big question. Well, there are no guarantees at all. I'd like to say that if you do A and B and C, you're going to prevent dementia. I'd love to be able to have that presentation, but unfortunately, we can't do that. So we're going to focus today on some of the life factor pieces, so lifestyle choices that you can make to support your brain health. So we're going to talk about things that we can't change first, but then we're going to focus on things we can. And I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the studies that are hot off the press this year about how if we engage in healthy brain activities, we have a 40% less chance of developing dementia. That's huge. All about being brain healthy. So let's start with talking about that study. So this is called the Landmark Study. It was released this year in 2023. It came through the Alzheimer Society of Canada, and it is arguably biggest study on dementia that we've seen in a while, but also they say that dementia is arguably the most challenging healthcare piece that we're facing in society today. We know that the numbers are drastic. We're looking at, by 2030, almost doubling the amount of people in Canada who have dementia. So we know that engaging in healthy brain activity and preventing dementia is really important, not just on an individual level, but on a level for economics, for the healthcare system, for all of those pieces. In Niagara, our population over 65 is actually quite large. We have 21% of our population in Niagara is over the age of 65. And we talked last time about age being a risk factor, and we'll talk about that today as well. But that is actually in proportion to the rest of Canada high. In the rest of Canada, we look at the full, we're about 19%, so we have a very high population of seniors here. We know that 61.8% of people living with dementia are women. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. And that 7% of people diagnosed in Ontario are under the age of 65. So some young onset dementias are happening as well. So let's dive into the risk factors that we cannot control. These are questions we get all the time, specifically genetics, age, and gender. So we're going to talk first about genetics because it's a big question. And I have lots of words on lots of slides coming after this, so I put this great big picture so you don't get too bored. And I'm going to send the slide deck out to Judith afterwards that she can share with you if you want to read it back. So let's start with genetics in general. So genetics play a role in everything that happens in your life. If your mom had diabetes, you might be at risk of developing diabetes. If your parent had a skin condition, you might be at risk of developing a skin condition. Alzheimer's is similar to that in most cases. So we have two types of Alzheimer's. We have late onset Alzheimer's disease, which is a disease that affects people over the age of 65. It's the most common type of Alzheimer's disease that we see. And research suggests that it can be caused by a combination of risk factors that we're going to talk about what we can address today, including age, genes, and lifestyle and environment. To date, though, there's not a lot of evidence that it's genetically inherited. We know that we can have some genes that put us at a little higher risk. Specifically, they look at what they call the ApoE4 gene. We don't need to know all of that unless you really want to go get genetically tested. But we know that roughly 1 in 4 people will have ApoE4. You each have 2 copies of APO genes in your body. You get one from your mom and one from your dad. They're not always E4. Sometimes they're E1, sometimes they're E2, sometimes they're E3. We know that if you have E4, you're at higher risk. If you have 2 copies of E4, you're at a little higher risk than that. But we've seen studies where people are in their 90s, 2 copies of ApoE4, and do not develop dementia. But there are other contributing factors. So what we say is late onset dementia is not genetically linked. We can't control our genes anyway. But there are other dementias. When we talk about genes, we have frontal temporal dementia, called Pick's disease sometimes, or FTD. In this one, we do see some rare types dementias that can be genetically linked. But again, overall, about 1 in 10 are genetically linked and the rest are not. So the rest are sporadic, so we can't really control that. Vascular dementia. So yes, there are some vascular dementia links. If your parent has a heart health issue, atrial fibrillation or other heart disease, you might be at higher risk of developing heart health issues, which will put you at higher risk of vascular dementia. And we know that there are risk factors around vascular health, around obesity and exercise and cholesterol and high blood pressure that we need to control. But generally, vascular dementia, again, not genetic. We do not have any genetic link that we know of for Lewy body dementia. Again, they say age is the most common risk factor. But there are some rare diseases that do have genetic risk factors, like Huntington's disease or familiar prion disease. These are genetic. You have to inherit a gene from your parent in order to develop those dementias. So these are risk factors we can't control. Age. Anyone got a fountain of youth in their backyard? You should be sharing, okay? So age is the primary risk factor for dementia. Your risk will double every 5 years after the age of 65. We can see that this is what they're projecting the increase of dementia will look like by the time 2050 comes. So you're seeing a 203% increase over the next, 20 years or so. So we're seeing a lot of people are developing dementia. Now this is directly attributed to the baby boomer population hitting their 65 to 90 age group bracket now. And we know that your risk is higher there. So we can't control our age, not yet anyway, they're still working on that. The other thing we can't control is our sex. So unfortunately, ladies, more women have dementia than men. That's just the way it works. We live longer. That's what happens. There are other contributing factors around hormones and our just makeup, but overall, you can see that it's hard to see those two different colors on the screen, but you can see the color difference between men and women, with the female being the lighter yellow, or the yellower color than the orange. More women than men. Okay, so those are scary thoughts and stats. We're going to talk about what the landmark study says. It says we can reduce our risk of dementia by up to 40% by engaging in healthy brain lifestyle pieces. So this is our sort of modifiable risk factor roadway. So when we're younger in life, so talk to your kids and your grandkids, one of the things that helps us to prevent dementia is higher education. So lack of education can contribute, according to the study. That's not something we can do too much about as we get older, but if we're younger. The other things that we see when we hit midlife that can contribute to dementia, we're not going to talk too much today about it, but hearing loss. So those of you who have hearing loss and are putting off going to the hearing doctor, the ear doctor, to get your hearing checked, or refuse to wear your hearing aids, it's a contributing factor to developing dementia. So we want to make sure we take care of that. Traumatic brain injuries, that's a no-brainer, no pun intended. Hypertension, alcohol misuse, and obesity in our middle years, not treated and not taken care of, affects our brain health and can put us at much higher risk of dementia. So we're not going to focus too much on those ones today. We're going to get up to the top where we talk about risk factors that happen later in life, things that we can control later in life. So smoking. Again, I think we've heard lots on smoking in our life about what the effects of smoking are on your body. Depression. We're going to talk a little bit about social isolation and depression. Physical activity. We're not going to talk too much about air pollution because, again, plant your trees and do well, but there's not much we can actually do about the pollution, except for to advocate to our governments about taking care of it. And we'll talk a little bit about health concerns. So let's move into these pieces that we can change. So we're going to look at these ones. We're going to talk about being social, challenging your brain, being physically active, eating well, reducing your stress, and having regular checkups. So let's start with having regular checkups and managing our health. So you need to know your numbers. How many people know your numbers? What's your regular blood pressure? What's your sugar level look like? What is your baseline cholesterol level? We should know our numbers. If you don't know your numbers, that means you haven't had a regular checkup at your doctor and had your blood work done. So you should know your numbers. These medical conditions impact your health and especially impact your brain. We know that cholesterol and blood levels and sugar levels specifically are directly related to heart health and brain health. and put you at much higher risk of developing dementia if they're not well controlled. So having regular checkups. How many people only go to their doctor when they're sick or need a prescription refilled? You're all laughing at me. I'm not seeing any hands. But that's definitely me. I can tell you I never go see my doctor unless I'm sick or I need a prescription of some sort. But the problem is that then your doctor doesn't get to know you, especially now where doctors only see you for like 10 minutes at a time in their office and they're standing at the door with their hand on the knob trying to get out of the room. They don't get to know us, so they don't know if something is changing. So with dementia, we don't always know something is changing with our memory, so we need our doctor to know as well. So book an appointment with your doctor and see him every 6 months. Just make sure you get in there and have a conversation. Make sure he knows your name. We also want to make sure we are looking at our stress and anxiety and depression. Now, we talked last time a little bit about depression, so I'm not going to talk a little bit too much about it today, but depression is it mimics dementia. It has a lot of the same symptoms with withdrawal and fatigue and attention deficit. People who have major depression can struggle and have memory issues as well. So we want to make sure we're controlling that. Of course, weight is a contributing factor to, so obesity is a contributing factor to cholesterol and blood pressure and other vascular issues. Our medications need to be reviewed. Again, there's that doctor. It becomes really, really important. How many people are on more than 5 medications? Right? Lots of you all bet. You don't have to admit it in front of us, that's okay. But what I'm saying is that often we get on a medication and we start at 30, 40, we start taking a medication, and by the time we become a senior, that medication is not senior brain friendly. We've been on the same medications for a long time. So it becomes what we call anticholinergic. Big word, what it means is it's just not friendly for your brain the older we get. So we need to make sure we get good med reviews by our doctors and make sure we explore whether the medication we're taking is still appropriate or needs to be switched up based on our aging brain. We have to think about that. And of course, sleep. Sleep important. So we need to be really mindful of all of our medical conditions and really remember to make sure we're following up. Don't ignore your health. That's the first thing we can do to keep our brain healthy. All right, let's talk about food. I already talked about chicken soup, but let's talk about food. We're going to talk about the benefits of food for your brain. So the food or a brain healthy diet. So eating a brain healthy diet can increase your concentration, increase your focus and alertness, help you to improve that mood, help you to decrease your stress, helps with weight management, reduces your chronic illnesses, so really helpful for things like diabetes, cholesterol. There are foods that help with blood pressure, and increase your neuronal communication. So we can test this theory. I don't even need to tell you about the studies, I can test the theory. Go out and have your favorite treat, favorite hamburger for lunch one day. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate on whether that's Harvey's or Burger King or McDonald's or Wendy's. You can all debate that later. But have your favorite burger, see how you feel 2 hours later. I know how I would feel. Heavy, ready for a nap. A couple days later, because I need time to recover from the burger, go out and have a really healthy lunch. Something full, a salad or something full of dark leafy greens and wonderful bright colored vegetables and healthy fats and a white chicken type protein. See how you feel. You're going to feel energetic and healthy. We don't need to see the scientific studies to know that if we eat well, it's better for our brain. Our brain actually consumes 30% of the energy that we take in. So of all the food we put in our body, our brain uses 30% of that energy. So let's talk a little bit more about food. Okay, so let's start with antioxidants. So when we talk about brain use or energy use in the brain, It's like Science 101, where something uses energy, there's a byproduct or waste. So when we talk about brain and the way antioxidants work work like Mr. Clean for the brain. So our brain uses energy, and the byproduct that it leaves behind is something called free radicals. Right out of the 60s, I know. Those free radicals, our brain cleans them up and sort of disposes them on its own. But the older we get, it's a slower process for our brain. But antioxidants help our brain to clear away those free radicals. So keeping our brain a little bit healthier. So these molecules that fight the free radicals, because those compounds can become, if those levels become too high, your free radical levels become too high, then they're linked to multiple illnesses. So that includes things like diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. So antioxidants. So if you walk through the grocery store, you're going to find all the products with antioxidants are promoting antioxidants in big bold letters across it, because it's the buzzword of the nutrition community. But the best way to get it is in the fruit and vegetable section of your grocery store, because that's where the best antioxidants are found. They're going to be found in dark leafy greens and vegetables and fruit. Now, I will say, because I need to be nice, that it's also in dark chocolate. Okay, my slides won't flip. All right, the little guy's dead. All right, so let's talk about omega fats. You might have heard about omega fats before. So your brain is actually mostly made of fat. The human body can really actually make most of the fats it needs on its own from other raw materials, but that isn't actually the case for omega fats. So omega-3 fatty acids, or omega-3 fats, these are essential fats that the body cannot make by itself. So we want to actually make sure we get those omega fats in our diet. They're mostly found in fish, oily fish, but if you're not a fish eater, you can get them in nuts like almonds and cashews. You can get some omega fats out of your nuts. So really important to try to add some of those into your diet as well. Healthy fats help us stabilize the cell walls that are in our brain, and they can reduce the inflammation and help our immune system work a little bit better. So we want to make sure those are part of our diet. Anybody have to take B12 vitamins? I know lots of people who have to take B12 vitamins as they grow. What happens is B12 is really, really important in the formation of red blood cells. Red blood cells are what carry oxygen up to your brain, and they support normal functions of our brain cells. They boost our energy, so if you're low in B12, you might feel tired. They support your bone health. If you're low in B12, you might have some trouble with your bones. And they support nice healthy skin and hair. So about 6% of people over the age of 60 are low in B12, and 28% are actually borderline low. So important, going back to that conversation about having blood tests at your doctor, to make sure. We don't want to take vitamins unless we need to, but you should have the doctor check you out for B12. So we know that having a really low lack of B12 can make you feel tired and very confused. So important to think about B12 as part of that healthy diet. Try to move this over here and see if it'll let me flip my mouse. So calcium, again, found in dairy products, nuts. It's a universal messenger in your brain, calcium. So it's one of those things that we talk about. It opens up channels that help us regulate neuronal functions as well. And so calcium is involved in sort of long-term processes like supporting memory and laying down new memories. So again, we want to make sure that we're getting a good amount of calcium in our diet, and that we're being checked to make sure we're not calcium deficient. Vitamin D. Again, This is going to help your body absorb that calcium. You need vitamin D. If anyone's been told they have osteoporosis and they're told to take calcium on a daily basis, they also need to take a vitamin D to help you absorb that calcium. But it's essential for your immune system, but also a really great anti-inflammatory and a really large antioxidant, which we already talked about. So really important to think about that. And vitamin E, found in dark leafy greens. These are going to be things like spinach and broccoli and all the things that my kids won't eat. But these, and folate, and it shows that they're going to help with cognitive decline and reduce depression. So you can see how food can be really, really important. So for the other way to get antioxidants is to make your food taste good, because we tell you to reduce your salt, we tell you to reduce your sugars, but we want to make sure that we can make things taste good. So spices, they play a significant role in how we cook and consume food, make things taste good. So we want to make sure that we can make it healthy. We can really make or break a dish that tastes bland, right? I know some of us have to order meals from places, and it really makes or breaks whether the food tastes good, right? So these kind of spices, they add to your taste buds to make you feel better. As you get older, actually, the research says that there's 4 different taste bud centers. So it's sweet, sour, bitter, and I lost it, it's gone. But anyway, the one that you completely hold on to the most as you get older is bitter. And so then you need more sugar to offset it, right? So instead of adding sugar, which is not so good for you, you can add things like these things to give you a little bit more flavor in your food. Okay, we're still talking about modifiable risk factors. So we talked about omega-3 fatty acids. They're all, like I said, they're in walnuts, olive oil, and mostly those fishy fish, those oily fishes. And we have to get a whole, I know I sound like the food guy, right? But you have to get a good amount of healthy grains in your diet to also help your brain. These help you with your gut. And when you have problems with your gut, it affects your brain as well. So we want to make sure that we are providing enough energy to our brain. So again, whole grains such as oats, barley, quinoa, they're really rich in the B vitamins, and they help us reduce that inflammation in the brain. Superfoods, I'm sure you've heard of superfoods, things like blueberries, pomegranates. They have flavonoids in them. Flavonoids are wonderful antioxidants for your brain as well. And of course, this is where I say you have to reduce your fine sugar and make sure that you are taking care of your brain that way. And limit your foods with saturated fats. A saturated fat is a fat that goes solid on your counter. So when you leave it out, it gets the film on it, that's saturated fats, right? The ones that won't do that. And it's really, really important. Like I said, dark chocolate will help you out. One more thing I want to say about dark chocolate is red wine also has antioxidants in it. And so research says 5-ounce glass, nobody ever drinks a 5-ounce glass. I know that the glasses are 8 ounces every time you fill them. However, 5 ounces is what they say is okay. So that's what I'm going to tell you. A day can really help as long as your doctor says it's all right, because it has some great antioxidants in it. And by the time you are feeling thirsty, when you're over the age of 40, which I'm assuming everyone here is, you are already dehydrated. That is part of our aging process. We don't feel thirst the way we used to. So making sure you drink lots of water and stay hydrated is really, really important. 75% of your brain is made up of water. So you need to make sure we're giving it what it needs. Even a small amount of hydration or dehydration, so let's just say 2%, can have a negative effect on your brain function because it causes lack of sodium, a loss of sodium and electrolytes. So really, really important to stay hydrated. All right, so I'm just going to round up our food section by saying The Mediterranean diet is probably the diet that is most commonly referred to when we talk about keeping our brain healthy. Basically, they do better in Europe than we do here. They have less dementia, less other illnesses because they eat something. All right, let's talk about being physically active. So we know that currently they suggest about 30 minutes or more, at least 3 times a week of physical activity. I imagine they might have physical activity events that you can attend here. Generally, I see that. Combining studies of like 11 different studies that we looked at, we know that studies say that if you exercise, you can reduce your risk of developing dementia by 30%. This is specific, very specific to Alzheimer's as well. When we look at Alzheimer's disease, they actually reduce the risk by 45%. That's huge. That's a huge risk reduction for dementia by keeping your brain healthy by exercising. So exercise is going to enhance the blood flow to your brain and increase your size and density of your capillaries in your brain. So it's going to do some great things. It's going to strengthen your brain cell connections to one another, and it's going to improve your mood and concentration and reduce stress, which we said was another risk factor, and improve your sleep. So lack of sleep, also a risk factor, so this helps that way. You have to make sure you enjoy what you're doing, because if you're exercising and you hate it, that's not going to be so great either. So the research studies in this area don't use the same definition for physical activity. Most of them report that aerobic exercise, so basically your heart has to get a little bit fast, right? But I'm going to say you don't want to just dive into doing something like that without talking to your doctor if you haven't been exercising for a long time. However, they do say aerobic exercise for 20 to 30 minutes is the best way to do that. And that is going to have the best effect on your brain. So the next thing that we want to talk about with regards to keeping our brain healthy is keeping your brain stimulated. So keeping your brain stimulated means that we want to do something new and exciting potentially as often as possible. So how many people do a crossword puzzle or a Sudoku or a word search or some sort of puzzle in a book? My grandmother used to do the cryptic crossword. I never could figure it out. So yeah, so really good. And how many of you have been doing that puzzle or word search or cryptic crossword or whatever for 5 or more years? So it is really important to know that you are taking care of your brain, and that is good. But I want to challenge you to also try something new, because our brains, they get used to certain things, and we want to try new things. Keeping our brain stimulating can really help with all sorts of different areas with regards to memory, attention, processing skills. So we can do all of these things. We are helping our brain has something called brain plasticity. So basically that means our brain has the ability to adapt and change itself and remodel and restructure itself based on our experience, what we do in life and how we challenge it. So I'm going to give you some examples now of some of the things and some of the benefits of the different activities you can try. So for example, let's talk about gardening. Now, I know most of you live around here, but I see some beautiful gardens and potted plants and things around in here. Gardening is a wonderful physical activity. It's an emotional activity for those of you who love it. For me, I hate it. I like to watch my husband garden. It's not my thing. I like to tell him where the plants should go, and I like the final product. But it's an opportunity to reminisce about places you've seen and gone and flowers you've enjoyed. It's about fresh air, it's about sunshine, it's about promotion of physical activity, but it also helps with cognitive function, and it stimulates your long-term memory. So we know there are lots of benefits to gardening, and so we all know that when we get out in the garden in the spring, after a long winter, it feels good to be outside as well. So that can increase our mood. All right, how many people play cards? All right, we got some bridge, euchre, crib players in the room. So lots of people love to play cards, but there are lots of benefits to playing cards. So playing cards gains to improve your memory recall can help. So shuffling and dealing cards helps you improve your fine motor reflexes, so we know that it's really important. When you're playing cards in groups, you're formulating intimate friendships, and friendships and socialization, we're going to get to that today, is really, really important for your brain. Mental stimulation, so there's a wide variety of card games. So again, if you've been playing euchre your whole life, try out a game of bridge. It's much more complex. I never really loved bridge. My grandmother taught it to me at one point, but I was always a euchre player. Or cribbage, or whatever is your favorite, right? It encourages hand-eye coordination, it encourages your motor skills. It's all-inclusive because you can modify games. So if someone has a memory problem, or they struggle with following that many rules, you can modify a card game. Card games are one of the easiest things to modify for people living with dementia. And if you have reduced manual dexterity, so you can't hold the cards anymore because you have arthritis or you have some other ailment, you can get these wonderful card holder things that can hold that for you. And again, really, really great benefits to keeping your brain stimulated. So also reading. So how many people read? Like a good mystery or a romance or a biography? Reading is really important, and there's lots of different reasons why people give up reading. So some of the common barriers to give up reading are things like poor vision, or sometimes the lack of strength to actually hold the book up for a long period of time. Sometimes you have a tremor, depending on your health. Dementia can cause us to stop. There's lots of medical reasons, but giving up reading doesn't mean that people have lost interest in books or magazines. And shared reading can really improve the quality of life for people. So I'll say, if you read alone, the first paragraph of every new chapter, read it out loud. Even if you're alone, because your brain's gonna go, huh, that's new. And it's really a new skill, and you're practicing it, and it's good for your brain. But reading together can really improve your socialization. So if anyone's in a book club, read some of the chapters together, read together, or read small stories together and discuss them. I used to love the Reader's Digest for that, because their stories were great, little short stories. So keeping in mind that reading together is important and can really help. All right, playing dice games. Anyone playing Yahtzee or other dice games? Does anybody know dice games besides Yahtzee? Because there's so many. Like, I know so many dice games. Again, helping you with fine motor skills by rolling, rattling, and shaking those dice, and handling the dice. It increases your attention span because you have to follow rules. It helps provide the opportunity to socially interact with other people. And it stimulates your auditory systems by shaking and tumbling out dice on the table. And so it's an exercise in visual perception as well. So lots of wonderful things you can do to keep your brain as healthy as possible with regards to keeping it active besides just your puzzles. The last thing I want to say is reminiscing is the best thing you can do for yourself. So instead of coming into a room like this and saying, "Hi, how are you? What a nice day it is," come up with some great conversation prompts. I challenge you to say, "Hi, how are you? Tell me about your first grade teacher." Do you remember her? I remember mine. I remember my first grade teacher. Yes, I do. Tell me about what it was like when you first started high school. Get into questions about your past. Talk about, the first time you drove a car. What was it like? What was the first time you drove a car? And what was it like? Think back, because these are reminiscent questions that most of us can relate to. And I challenge you to bring those questions forward and talk to each other about them. Because when we talk about reminiscent conversations, we are opening a door to our memory. We're opening a door to our long-term memory. And we are allowing our brain to make all sorts of connections in there that can be really, really helpful. All right, here is a big one, and people ask me about this one all the time. The benefits of music. So research shows that while people have dementia or progressive memory loss, music remains. Music is in a different part of your brain. I could probably get each and every one of you to sing a song, and you'll know the words because you remember it. My baloney has a first name, it's... You know it. You know it because you heard it over and over and over again. Or maybe it's a song that you knew over and over and over again. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. This will be in your brain for the rest of the day. Okay, so it sticks. Music sticks with us. We hold on to it. We are able to interpret things differently. We hold on to rhythm, prayer. So, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. You all know it because you learned it, and it's rhythmic and it's poetry. And so you hold on to these things in your brain. Music is really helpful. So again, I challenge you. Music as a program or music as something to do together is really wonderful. Music to stimulate your brain, you can do it more than one way. You can stick to the music that's part of your reminiscence bump period. So this is the age, what you were listening to between the ages of 10 and 30 years old. So you gotta think back. What were you listening to between the ages of 10 and 30 years old? And the reason is that's when your music sort of bed was formulated in your brain, and it's gonna call forth the most memory for you. So that'll be challenging for your brain to get that music back out and listen to it. Secondly, try something new. Now, I don't recommend the music that they're listening to on the radio these days. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good, but try something new. If you have always been a country music listener, pull out some big band. If you've always been an opera listener, try a little rock and roll. Stimulate your brain, right? The benefits of music is really, really important for everybody. So 10th and 30th birthday, you can figure it out. Okay, so that's the end of our topic of brain stimulating. Now let's talk about socialization. Of all of the things that I've talked about today so far about keeping your brain healthy, social interactions are the most important thing that you can do for your brain. We are wired as human beings to live together in interdependent small groups and communities. Our social interaction is providing us with stimulating and challenging environments that benefit the brain. It provides direct ways to preserve our brain health and increase our neurogenesis in the hippocampus and our prefrontal cortex. So all these different areas of the brain are stimulated by being social. This doesn't mean we're busy. So many of us are busy. We get up on a Saturday morning, we go to the bank, we stop at the Shoppers Drug Mart to get our pills, we might swing by the farmer's market, we potentially have to go to the post office or whatever. We have all these little stops we do. And yeah, we say hi to the cashier here and there, or we might run into a neighbor and say hi in the hallway, but we're busy. We're not necessarily social. So that's important to know the difference between busy and social. Social means you deliberately make time to do something you enjoy with another person.